We spent last episode talking about getting to know yourself and your own creative process and working on the things within that are kind of getting in your way. Well, today we're talking about a thing that's getting in my way that you might be able to relate to, and that is organization, getting organized. It is something that is so easy to ignore, so easy to think that your organizational system is pretty good when in fact it is holding you back quite a bit. So I want to explore that idea a little bit today, talk about the things that I'm doing to get more organized, and as always, I'm going to relate it back to playing video games and how they handle organization. Let's get started. Oh, I'm sorry. This is Game, Develop, Repeat, and I'm your host, Chris. A very well organized game is a beautiful thing. And I'm not just talking about the quest log. I'm not just talking about the user interface. I'm also talking about the underlying game mechanics, the conceptual organization, the narrative organization, the things that make a game feel like it makes sense. Like it's a structured world which you can navigate in a reasonable way. And if you get lost, you'll be able to find your way back on track with just some common sense and a little bit of thought. So, first, you know what? I'm going to try to keep this episode organized, which, if you know me, you know that's going to be a challenge. Let's start with let's tackle one of these things at a time, right? First things first, the easy one, the clean one, the simple one. Let's talk about user interface. Give you a couple examples. If your game is very simple, it is very easy to create a nice user interface for it, but you can still screw it up. I have played a fishing game that had one of the most baffling user interfaces that I've ever experienced. I'm not going to name drop the game, partially because I don't remember it, partially because I appreciated the game and the effort that went into it, and I was excited about it, and I don't want to bad talk that game, right? But it had a control scheme that was a bit of a nightmare. A less indie example would be the control scheme for MechWarrior Mercenaries. I think it was 3. I'm not sure. There was a real issue trying to play that game on the keyboard. So that's organizational within control scheme. I'm going to connect that with UI. I'm going to say that counts. There's also just the kind of thing where you put a button in a corner that you need access to more frequently. Or you put like just things in weird places. You know, you put your health in a spot where you can't really see it when you need to see it. You put enemies' health bars in front of or behind your health bar when they are either more important than yours or yours is more important than theirs, right? You put things in the wrong spot. You make it just a little bit too difficult for the player to see the information that they need to see. Those, I think, are the more simple examples, and we can all imagine a menu, a user interface on the the first menu you see on the game, right? The start menu. Wow, I am struggling today. Where you click on options, and then options gives you this weird mishmash of like graphical options where the screen resolution is not included in there, and then you go over to like screen options, and it has some things that should have graphics, and it goes to like controls, and then it has audio, but some element of the audio is included in the controls for some reason, even though you don't control anything with like a audio anything, right? Like there's just like poorly organized option menus, that sort of thing. Let's go to the next concept, right? So that's just user interface. Simple, clean, done. Gameplay. You can have wildly disorganized gameplay concepts, right? This to me is the kind of thing you run into in an RPG. This is something where you have stat systems that are intertwined in a hideous way or a very clean way, right? You could have theoretically, you could have a stat system in which increasing your armor somehow decreases your health. You could have a stat system in which increasing your attack somehow slows you down. And you could have things where different stats interact in very weird and unintuitive ways. And to me, that is disorganization. That is rough, confusing, hard to navigate. And to me, that's disorganized. Anytime that the random person that sees it for the first time looks at it and goes, what the heck? Well, you've got a disorganized system there, right? So that's basically all I've got to say about the gameplay side of things. You could have disorganization in terms of hotkey bindings. Once again, you could have disorganization in terms of your skill curve for the game, right? You could have that. Could be fun to play with, though, right? Who's to say that it has to be a certain way? But one of the things that frustrates players, at least frustrates me, is when something feels like that's not supposed to be happening yet, which is another version of that shouldn't be there. That's in the wrong spot. And that can break things so much within gameplay, right? Within the arc of a story, within the arc of a game's challenge curve. If you just throw the wrong thing in the wrong spot, it can go from being one of the coolest experiences in the game to one of the worst experiences in the game. And because the person just doesn't have the skills necessary to appreciate the design that you've put into it. You know, if you've designed something really beautifully and really crafted an experience, make sure that people are going to see it at the right time. Make sure that it's going to have the right impact. But we're talking about design and development a little bit more than I intended to here. So let's get back on track with just talking about some games. I think the last thing that I want to touch on here is story. I think disorganized story is something that is hard to notice a little bit because it just feels like bad writing. But how many times have you played a game where you go, what? Where you're just like, the kingdom of whatever the heck, right? The kingdom of Schnitzel and Durfkar are fighting. I've never heard of these. And then it starts talking about the moon and the moon's phase and like this like lore dump thing that happens right at the beginning. I consider that bad organization. I consider that bad storytelling. I consider it a bad structure. It drives me insane. I know that some people love this in fantasy writing. I am so frustrated by it. I think when you open with a whole bunch of mysterious words that nobody knows anything about, when you open with the names of several kingdoms that I have no emotional investment in, when you open with this like lore dump thing, I think you're doing it wrong. I think you should get me invested in a character a little bit and then start introducing me into their life in relation to the kingdoms, in relation to whatever the heck else is going on. And this is why games that tend to have like a huge political landscape in them tend to fall flat for me, because I need to get invested in a character before I can get really invested in the world. And you would think like, oh, maybe that means you just don't like games with a focus on world building. No, I love world building. That's what I love most about like Brandon Sanderson books. I find them incredible. I'm obsessed with the world building, in Dungeon Crawler Carl. I think it is so freaking cool. But Dungeon Crawler Carl sucked me in with characters and then started establishing a world. Brandon Sanderson consistently, actually I can't say consistently, I've only read one of his series, but I was not annoyed at the world building. I was pulled into it very quickly. I'm not sure exactly what he did, but he didn't do the lore dump thing that drives me crazy. He paced it appropriately. And as far as games go, pacing games, pacing story, pacing world building. I want you to just imagine a world in which Celeste started by giving you a weird lore dump about the mountain. I want you to think about Celeste and go, like, instead of them just going, oh, this mountain's kind of mysterious, weird things happen to people climbing it, good luck on your adventure, right? And they've already kind of established just a tiny bit of character. They give you like a sentence or two about the adventure you're about to go on and how the mountain is just a little bit weird, because that's all you need. Imagine if instead they were just absolutely dumping lore on you. Like, there's a world in which you make a game about a character climbing a mountain that has a little mystery to it. And then instead of going, just here you go, experience this and then figure it out on your own a little bit, you just go through this whole thing about the ancient king of the mountain and the curse and what, you know? Ugh. Okay, sorry. I'm just like imagining how it could have gone wrong. For me, at least. And maybe that would be great for somebody else. Maybe somebody would love that game, and maybe you could execute that very well. But I do think that story in a game needs to be delivered in a certain way. But that's just me. Those are what I enjoy. I enjoy a game that delivers story in relation to characters. And in order to do that, it has to be done in a certain order. And that's the part I'm getting at. It's not, oh, every game needs to do this exact thing in this way because it's what I like. No, what I'm saying is, if you want a game to be focused on the world and the world building and the exploration of that world and getting to know it, you got to structure your story in a way where the player gets curious about that and slowly discovers it and gets to know more about it as you're going. If you want them to be curious about a character, then you want to kind of introduce the character in a way that instills curiosity and then work through that in a not like systematic dry way, but in a way that makes sense. You know, you got to progress through it. You got to keep it a little bit in order. Not so strictly. It's still got to feel like a nice, creative, smooth, kind of real thing, but you know, let's be honest for a second. Games are illusions. Games are manufactured experiences, and sometimes you gotta fake authenticity a little bit, not in terms of your enjoyment of making the game or you know, the characters' experiences, but you gotta create this structure that feels very loose and fun and whatever, but in the background it is like the most intensely organized, carefully crafted, incredibly detailed, structured thing. You know? In fact, let's talk about the development side of things. Rather than talk about the specific organization of games and how to get organized within a game's design and so on, I don't know. That's up to you. That's up to your specific project. And frankly, I'm a bit disorganized. Instead of talking about all that, I want to talk about organizing the process of making a game, getting to where you can sit down and work on some stuff and really make some progress. And I just want to talk about let's start with what I'm doing. What I'm doing right now to clean up my system a little bit. I fell into a trap of having too much stuff on my desktop. Miscellaneous text files that say, literally some of them says like, interesting idea, right? Like some of the names of these text files are just like random idea. That was actually the name of one, was literally random idea was the name of the text file. And I was like, okay, great, good, real helpful. So I organized all of those. I got all of those into a folder and I put it somewhere. And I didn't just throw them into the folder. I created subfolders. I got it kind of organized, and I'm going to work through that and collect some of my other ideas and just get like a creative idea system going. Even then, that's not going to be enough. But that's going to get me started. That's going to get me to a point where I'm like, okay, I think we can start working with this. We can start finding stuff. We can start sorting through it. It's not just insane chaos in front of me at all times, which is tough. If you have a creative tendency, there's a decent chance that you get caught up in ideas. And if you have a whole bunch of interesting ideas sitting in front of you at any given moment and you're trying to focus on one of them and then you look over and you go, oh, there's a text file titled interesting idea. Maybe that's relevant, and you open that up and then it pulls you down another rabbit hole, and then you go to another text file that says fish game idea, and you're like, oh, this idea that I'm working on is about fish game, and then you're like, oh wait, that's a different fish game, and then you just can't stay focused. Whoops. You know, there's a chance that having too much stuff right in front of you is going to sabotage you. That is my theory. That is why I cleaned up my desktop. And it was driving me crazy. I was looking at it and going, this is so annoying. This is too much. I can't handle it. I got to clean this up. Dumb. Done. No more. So I did all of that. And I feel good about it, but I had to go through all of these ideas that I had. I just saw all of these random thoughts and ideas, and then it's always frustrating going through and organizing that stuff. I'm sharing this because somebody can relate to this. Somebody is going, oh my God, yeah, I've been avoiding doing this because, Jesus, that looks like it's going to suck. Well, it's worth doing. You go through and you go, oh, I had that idea and I didn't do it. Oh, I had that idea and I didn't do it. Oh, I had that idea and I got caught up in this other thing. Oh, it's worth doing it because then you'll see somewhere you go, oh, this is cool. This is exciting. And you'll see, for me, you'll see the overarching need for a system. And you'll get closer to designing a system that works for you because you'll become more aware of the issue and more aware of what you can do to improve the problem or solve the problem. And that's where I'm at now. Let's talk about systems. I need one. You probably need one too. You might need one. I have a problem of coming up with an interesting idea, writing it down and throwing it on my desktop, and then going, I'll sort that out later, and then never sorting it out later. And I'm trying to decide if the problem is the throwing the idea on the desktop or if the problem is the never sorting it out later. I suspect it's the never sorting it out later. I suspect that I need to create a system in which I go through whatever ideas I had once a week, once a month, once a whatever, and just sort through them and, just clean it all up. That way I can go crazy. I can write my ideas. I can do all the whatever the heck I want to do. And then later, once we're done having fun, we can clean up and we can put away our toys, right? Like, it's like, okay, you had fun creating a bunch of stuff. Maybe now you can clean up so that next time you can have fun again. Is it that simple? I feel like I'm being really condescending to myself, and by extension, probably anybody who thinks that I'm talking about them when I say that. The thing about cleaning up your toys. But I think it might be that simple. I think the answer genuinely might just be, okay, you're done playing, clean up. Right? The answer might just be, okay, every day when you're finished playing, clean up. And this relates to my work. I don't have as much problems with this with physical things too, like my job. This relates to it a tiny bit in terms of like at the end of the day, I clean up my stuff because I got tools everywhere, right? And I've made a mess. It's inevitable. I work in construction. Stuff gets messy, right? There's miscellaneous bits of hardware and whatnot. And when I'm on the job, I just go, okay, clean that up, clean this up. Okay, end of the day, good. Because if I start the next day and my stuff is not cleaned up, I'm not in a good place. I'm immediately in it, just like, come on, what the heck is going on? It's got to be pretty clean. Because then I go into the day and I go, okay, here we go, great. We're starting off good. This is what I need. That's what I need. Let me grab this, put everything here, and then boom, I can just roll. That's the other element of this. I think creatively, it's easy to go, oh, I'm just creating stuff. We can run wild with it. It doesn't need to be organized. It does. It does need to be organized. And I don't like being the guy who's telling myself this right now because I like to just go, hey, we're making stuff. It's good. It's fun. It's whatever. But more and more, I'm seeing how essential it is to keep things clean, to keep things organized, to keep things nice and neat. Because if you want to play, you got to have a good place to do it. You can't have Legos all over the floor. You can't be stepping on them. You got to clean it up so that you can have fun after. And I got to just find a version of that for myself. I think literally, I know this is ridiculous. Now that I framed it that way, it just makes perfect sense. Every time that I make a bunch of stuff, right at the end, clean it all up, right? I make a whole bunch of text files. I do this, I do that, whatever. Don't work up to the very last minute. That's the other part of it. Give yourself 10 minutes to clean up, and then clean up. That's not that hard. I know why that's hard. I just figured out why that's so hard. Because then I have to have a stop time. I have to have a start time and a stop time and a cleanup time. And then I have to, if I'm in the middle of a fun, exciting, creative idea, I have to go, okay, we're done. We're stopping. And if I'm not in the middle of a fun, creative idea, then when I start creating stuff, I have to have a stop time. And then I'm like, okay, I'm obligated to go all the way up to the stop time. And it feels a little bit less fun, playtime, exciting, goofy, right? But I think it's really worth it. That's what I suspect. So I think that's going to be my challenge for myself. I think I'll challenge myself to have a session of creative work where I stop at a specific time and then do cleanup. I know it seems almost trivial and ridiculous at this point, but that actually probably means it's a good challenge. I'm a big fan of something that is a trivial, ridiculously easy challenge or habit because it's easier to stick with. All right, here's your question for this week. Is there any way in which you would benefit from adjusting your organizational systems? Is there any way in which you would go, actually, if I change this will make me enjoy what I'm doing more. This will make it more fun. It'll make it cleaner. Is there any little piece of, yeah, I guess I should do this every week or every day or whatever, just to keep things nice and clean? I do think for me, it is a end of the day cleanup. It is okay, we did that. Okay, we had our fun. Clean up real quick. Make sure that everything is nice and neat and tidy. And then you can come back to it tomorrow. So I'm going to experiment with that this week. I encourage you to run your own experiments this week. What kind of experiment? I don't know. But something small is always nice. Let me know how it goes for you. You know where to find me. I'm in the Discord. You got my email address. It's anxiousbudagames@gmail.com. Here's a little secret. That email address has notifications turned on. My personal email does not. If you email me on that email address, I hear a ding on my phone. People don't even get that when they text me. That will change at some point. But people in my life, because I get so many texts and I get so few emails on that address, that when I get an email on that address, I go, oh, what's this? When I get a text, I just check my texts regularly and then I see them anyway. The noise, okay, that's a focus tip. It's really nice to not have noises happening on your phone. If there's a noise that happens on your phone more than once an hour, to me that's okay, that has to change. That's not allowed. No way. Nope, absolutely not. I need to be able to focus. If I'm locking in on focusing on something, there cannot be a noise happening 2-3 times an hour interrupting me. It is so destructive. So anytime that I have a notification like that, I shut that down. I remember having those notifications on, and I remember the point where I turned them all off, and I cannot imagine going back to that life of having notifications going off on my phone all the time. I could not stand it. So there's my random little additional rant recommendation thing. And you're more able to do that than you think you are, is the other part of it. It feels like if you turn off your notifications, everything is going to fall apart. It's not. Literally, people cannot get through to me via text. If somebody texts me and they're trying to get my attention, I've told people, just call me if I don't answer the text, which is what they do anyway, right? So, whatever. That's everything I've got for you this week, right? Have fun. Have a good week. Get out there. Make some stuff. And have fun with it. Thanks for listening. Bye-bye.